Hello and welcome back to the Birth Confidence Summit. I'm Charlotte Kanye and today I'm welcoming Naraya. So welcome Naraya. And me and Naraya met a number of years ago as we were both journey practitioners, which is a healing modality that we're both trained in that uncovers stored cellular memories in your body that are not helping you to function as a wonderful human and clear them out. So when I met Naraya, you'd already had 2 children, and it was way before I had my children, or a little bit before I had my children. So I remember vaguely you were talking to me about it, and it was it was an inspiration on some level in the back of my mind, even though it wasn't the right time for me to have children yet. So today I'd love to hear some of your experiences. I think your stories have got some really beautiful parts to them. And I think we have to go right back to Germany, I think, for your first child. So do tell me a little bit.
Yeah, well, thank you first of all for having me, Charlotte. This is it's really a privilege and joy and honor to be here on this summit. I think what you're doing here with the Confident Birth Summit is something that absolutely fills a gap that nobody else, as far as I have been observing over many years in the whole kind of industry, has been filling. And so there will be so many women and even men out there, fathers to be, who would be and will be really interested in getting this kind of content and in allowing themselves to be reminded of their and our innate ability to make decisions born from our own body wisdom and our own sovereignty as human beings, rather than externalizing everything to the medical profession, because I'm always wondering, what have they got to do with giving birth? Just rather than having usurped the whole process in order to probably control us in not so very positive ways. So, okay, birth stories. I love telling my birth stories because they're both very positive. So I have 2 children. I have a son who is by now 22 and my daughter is 21 by now. Just been 21 last week, yes. And my son, firstborn, was born in Germany, and my daughter was born somewhere in a tiny mission hospital in Kenya, near Lake Victoria, somewhere very remote. So, but my own story really starts with the pregnancy and the birth of my son. I would say in hindsight, I was back then a spiritual, unawakened illiterate. So I really knew nothing about anything. I did not know the words body wisdom or even natural birth. I really knew nothing. I only knew what the mainstream was presenting me with as I got pregnant, and that was all very beautiful and positive. And so seamlessly, I threaded myself into the procedures that I was supposed to be having. So the regular checkups with the gynecologist and those kind of things, and ultrasounds and whatever have you. And it all went very well, and there was nothing wrong. But as I was then progressing through the pregnancy and coming closer to the time of giving birth, somehow this whole idea of going into a hospital to deliver my baby, now I say, I'm not a postman. I didn't deliver children. I gave birth, and that was great. So the whole idea was not something in my body, something in my being was stirring. Something was not happy with that idea. And so already within the pregnancy, some of things the gynecologist told me about what I was supposed to be doing and not doing, it just didn't sit right with me. So I started researching a little bit about what alternatives there might be existing, came across the idea of home birth. But that was like my partner, my husband, he couldn't comprehend this, and neither anyone in my family, and I knew no other women who were pregnant or anything, so that was out of the picture straight away. Also for me it was far too scary. Then at least I came across a so-called birth house, as they called it in Germany, which was run by some midwives. I didn't even know back then that midwives still existed. I thought it was, hospital, honestly. And it was strange. So anyway, I got in touch with these midwives, and they did a lovely birth preparation course, which my husband and I then attended, at least teaching me how to breathe properly. And so that kind of, that relaxed me a little bit. I knew, okay, fine. At least someone has something to offer here that is not quite just leaving me in the darkness of what I was facing as in heading towards the birth. And so in the end, we decided to actually go there for our birth experience. It was a very beautiful house, set up with all the amenities, with a pool and slings from the ceiling to hang yourself in, and a beautiful bed, and all very sweet, and the sweetest colors and everything. So it really felt like an embrace and was very, very beautiful. Problem was that the whole thing was like an hour's drive away from where we lived, but I didn't think that was a problem at the time. So anyway, long story short, the time of birth really came, and the due date really came, and it went. And it went a little longer, and it went a little longer. And everybody got very nervous. My son by that time was, as they called it, overdue. Now I know better. Children come when they're supposed to come. None has stayed inside. They all come out eventually. So he was supposedly overdue by that time by about 10 days. And the midwives got extremely nervous because they had just recently opened their facility, and they were very much under attack from the local medical establishment, or under scrutiny, very closely watched. And so they were scared of having to refer a woman to the hospital from their facility in case anything went wrong. I was 32 at the time, and that was already considered old. Like already kind of a risk group I was labeled into. And I was thinking, well, I don't feel that old, but okay, fine, they have their standards. So they became nervous, and they became scared, of having to refer me, something could go wrong, and so forth. And they did everything with my consent, of course, to try and get this birth going in natural ways. They told me all kinds of interesting things. In the end, they even made me, and all, as I say, with my full information and consent, to breathe in oxytocin in order to naturally induce the birth. Well, my son refused to come out before his time. Even with natural oxytocin, nothing happened. So we are now on day 13 after giving birth. After the due date, sorry. Day 13, with back and forth, constant communication for these 3 days. A lot of tension on all sides now, of course. It wasn't that much fun, and I had to constantly, but somehow there was divine intervention. Somehow I was given this ability to check in with myself and then decide, okay, this is the next step. Okay, in this moment, this is the next step. Okay, do I feel that there's anything wrong with me or my baby or my body? No. Okay, this is the next step, and so on and so forth. Then day 13, I had another checkup with a gynecologist who freaked out on me completely freaked out on me, did an ultrasound, told me that if I were not to go to hospital and have an induced birth right now, right from her practice, from her clinic to the hospital, my baby and I would be severely endangered. I don't know how I did it, but I very calmly asked her, what's the evidence for that? And she started scrambling. She couldn't really say, well, it's overdue, it's overdue, it's overdue. And I said, yes, so what? Is there anything wrong with the heartbeat of the baby? Is the baby in distress? Well, I'm in distress, but only because of all this stress. But is my baby really in danger? She couldn't really tell me. So I left there, and later I was told that this gynecologist had 2 children and 2 births induced in hospital. So she was very clearly just projecting her own insecurities, her own trauma, unresolved things onto me as her patient, which of course is not a fun experience at all. Anyway, so I left that clinic. Here I was with my husband, so sitting in the car. What are we doing now? What now? Okay, this one says we're going to hospital. Meanwhile, just before actually that, the midwives now had already refused to take us because they said, no, we can't take the risk anymore. You have to go to hospital. So still, the mainstream hospital was kind of not an option for me. I said, what am I going to do? Here we are. We were just sitting in the car. What next? So somehow we were then looking again for other midwives in the area because I felt more comfortable now to look for another midwife, maybe get a second opinion, what would be the next step, and so forth. We found an elderly lady, an Austrian lady with this wonderful Viennese accent. Called her up. She was over 60, almost 65 by that time. She had helped more than 8,000 babies into life. And she immediately, when I called her, immediately the voice, I can't imitate the accent, but she was just calming me down. She said, okay. So she was practicing actually from a hospital, but she was a coming in midwife, which also I didn't even know existed. Yeah, so she could have the women that she assisted in that hospital. Then doctor was on standby if she needed. If she didn't need, woman in, woman out, finished. So that was very lovely. So she said, no, just come, I'll check up on you, and then we see what is meant to be. So we went there, she examined me. She said, no, everything is perfectly all right here.
Can I interrupt you for one moment, please? Sorry. Okay, it's recording again.
Wonderful. So this wonderful elderly midwife, she examined me and very calmly said, no, there's everything all right here. If you go home, you take a nice hot bath, you go to sleep. If by tomorrow morning nothing has happened, you come back and we see what can be done and what must be done. So far, there's nothing wrong here. So I did exactly as we did exactly as she said, went home, I took a nice bath, I just relaxed as much as possible in the water, it was really wonderful. Then went to sleep at around 10 p.m., I think. Really relaxed and was okay with myself. By 11:30, oh no, even by 10:30, something started rumbling in my belly. And I think by 11, I woke up my husband and said, I don't think this is digestion. I think we're getting going here. And so it naturally progressed. She had given us instructions that if you just stay at home for as long as you can, if contractions come every, I don't know what she said, every minute or something like that, or every 3 minutes, I can't quite remember that, you call me and you make your way. Now this hospital luckily was only like an 8-minute or 10-minute drive away. So of course we were packed already for 2 hours, for 2 weeks. Sorry, for 2 weeks we'd been packing for the place, and so I was just going back and forth from the bedroom to the bathroom, spending a lot of time sitting on the toilet, everything emptying out, and then we called her at around midnight or something. She said, okay, yeah, fine. My husband called her and he described, she asked some question. Okay, make your way, time now. So we got into the car. I was sitting very awkwardly, kind of backwards on the back seat in the car, like in squat position, because that was what was feeling best. On that 10-minute drive, we had to kind of stop 3 or 4 times to get the stomach emptied through vomiting as well. But I was kind of very happy with that, because it felt like, just empty the body. Something is coming here and it is big. We need that space, So I kept kind of laughing almost. And it was a very, very positive experience. We were laughing in the car as my husband drove along. He said, can we go again? I said, yes, but be prepared to stop and stop fast if necessary. So we arrived in the hospital. I was just going back and forth between the toilet there. I just wanted to be on the toilet. Anyway, it was easy. It was effortless. And all I can say, what I felt, I did not, and that is my main message here. That's my main thing that I really want women to hear. I did not feel pain. Despite the fact that everyone has told me and us for millennia that giving birth is extremely painful, is horrible, and so on and so forth. I did not feel pain. All I felt was immense forces of nature working through my body, expanding, contracting, doing its thing. And as I allowed myself to relax into this, to breathe into this, to open with these forces, to go and flow with these forces, well, so they did their job beautifully and without resistance, without any abstraction or contraction that was not meant to be a contraction. When there was expansion and the womb contraction. So that's a beautiful balancing thing there in giving birth. So that's all I experienced. By 4:24, my son was born. Floops, out he was. No problem at all. I spent about the last 20 minutes on my back. That's when the midwife said, okay, I think it would be a good idea, because there weren't any other proper facilities in that hospital, then they just eased me on my back, and that was okay. Then I just needed to push a little bit. So it was the best that could be done in that environment. So son got out. Then the doctor just popped in, she called him, and he just stitched these tiny little, I had a tiny tear in my outer labia, but that was the only thing that happened. He stitched it up. I didn't even realize. She told me afterwards. Mm-hmm. And that was this birth experience. Then by 7 a.m., we were back home with our baby.
Oh, wonderful.
So yeah, as I said, the main thing that I want women to hear is that this is just a natural thing, and nature knows how to work our bodies, and our bodies are nature. They know how to work their own thing. We've done this for however long humanity has existed, and it's only very recently that the whole thing has been swept up by the medical profession. So this is a strange occurrence, and we do actually eventually maybe need to ask the question, why is that? What's that for? What's the purpose of that? How does that disempower us? And how can we actually reclaim our own lives, our own bodies, our most natural thing, as in reproducing, giving birth to babies, pregnancy, breastfeeding, all these things that come around that. And to me, I can only say, it's so much part of the divine feminine. And I guess that what the purpose of this whole suppression is to suppress the divine feminine. But we are rising, and this summit certainly is part of that.
Yeah, I do feel that as well. I love your message, because it's a question that people are not necessarily asking. Like you said, going with what is standard without questioning, why are we doing that? And then having the confidence to do something different, that can be really scary, because we're tribal animals, we're pack animals. To be an outlier and do something different, is really scary, because you're not part of that group, which is the safety, and it's all about safety. When you need to feel safe to give birth. That's why you need to trust it, otherwise that's a non-safe thing. Our neocortex makes an added layer of competition. Yes. Because so I love the way that you didn't have the fear. You were so connected to your body that you were able to connect to that energy. You trusted that.
Yes, I as I say, in retrospect, I really don't know how that happened. It just happened in those especially those last final days before the birthing experience. There was just such a connectedness that I had never known before within myself. And I can only say I'm really grateful for that. It was one of the main triggers, and then my son in himself and the way he turned out to be was my greatest first call to awakening, and how to start seeing the world and myself and my own life in a different way, and start healing what was not serving me in my life. In fact, when he's now 22, when he turned 18, I really said to him, you've been my greatest teacher here on this planet, and for that I'll be forever grateful.
Yeah. It's also possible that he came in and was talking to you to help you awaken, like in the womb, saying, I don't want that hospital, thanks, Mum. Not for me.
Oh, definitely.
And so
definitely.
We sometimes in our culture we kind of dismiss that as being a bit strange, or a bit like, oh yeah, we talk to our baby, but we don't actually really think of it like that. But actually, yeah, there's a partnership, a teamwork going on. He's inside your body, he's part of you in a real
absolutely
way. You're sharing thoughts, and you don't always, I know in my experience, I didn't always know what was mine and what was theirs. Sometimes I did. And their voice can be heard when you, like you said, the tune in part, because that's the key that will tell you whether you need to be in hospital or not. That's the key that will tell you where you need to be and what you need to do, is that tuning in to you, to your birth, your body, your story, which I love. And what I love is that you did that before you had any kind of spiritual teaching, which shows that this is just an ordinary thing that we can all do. We don't need to be experts in spiritual teaching and meditation and whatever. No, you've not done any of that back then, right?
Meditation was totally woo-woo to me at the time. I didn't even know what it was. People who meditated, they were kind of like sect or cult members somewhere. I mean, honestly, that was my worldview. It is hilarious now, because I'm an avid meditator, even a meditation teacher. But to really tune back into what kind of awareness I had and did not have, or what kind of worldview I had or did not have at the time, really makes me laugh out loud.
But I love how strong you were, and that that confidence, I see that as confidence, that you tuned into what was right for you and then withstood. I mean, the dead baby card is an appalling abuse of power that happens a lot today still, because who wants to go against someone saying your baby's not going to be safe, and to stand there and And
Yes.
question it like you did. Is there evidence for that? Because when there's evidence for that, you get a different feeling inside, because you are
Of
going
course.
to save your baby. But when there's no evidence, you get, and you, what's the evidence? They can't back it up. That's something I really want people to hear is possible, because it's so hard when you're trying to work out the right decision.
Yes.
And of course, the whole system of calling you overdue, it's upside down in the first place to be causing the stress, which is the opposite of what you need in that moment for the baby to come. So it's forcing the situation that, like what's it, self-fulfilling prophecy in a way, and at a point when there's nothing wrong, and it's a completely ordinary length of time. You were within a length of time, of course.
I feel that is so important now, that we bring across also how important it is to build your birth network and your pregnancy network and your safety net. The people, you need to be very, very aware and conscious what kind of people you surround yourself with, what kind of opinions. Like that gynecologist, had I known even before that she had 2 induced births and both were scary, and I don't know how laced with medication and panic, I would not have chosen her, even though back then, when I went to that there wasn't even a choice. This is where one went. It's how I ended up there. This is what we did. And it was, but now in retrospect, I'd say, really be so discerning on what kind of information you take in. Yes, it's good to also know what can go wrong in a birth and what possibly to do. But if we prepare ourselves in advance with really relaxing, with really tuning in with ourselves, with absorbing information on how it can go right and what is the best practice we can possibly apply in our lives to have the best possible birthing experience, and to really tailor it to our own needs, whether we want to be in water, whether we want to be in a pool, whether we want to be out in nature. If I would do it all over again, I'd be out there in that ocean I live by to give birth, day or night. Unless it's high tide and the waves are too high. But or have people carry salt water into a pool in my house, from that ocean, whichever way. Or somehow be out in nature. That would be my super idea by now. I'm aware in places like the UK where you're freezing right now, that's not always possible. But just, to give ourselves a really warm, embracing surrounding, which can be our own home. And if we're not so confident with that, it can be, as I first chose, like a midwife's place that have a beautiful, warm environment, whatever the case might be. But choosing consciously that environment, and just, thinking about the sterile hospital thing, and, it's like, and being strapped to machinery and all those kind of things, not being able to move freely, and then being subjected to ad hoc and ad promptu suggestions. Oh, we need to cut this. That would scare the hell out of me these days. Not the other thing, And I think the other thing that, of course, is is very important, is just the cultivation of total trust and faith, not only in our own capabilities, but also in our divine God, creator, universe, whatever we want to call that, in our own lives. But because if we trust that, then we know that whatever happens is always and always to and for our highest good, and also for the highest good of our babies and our loved ones around. And that we have certain soul contracts with each other that we set up, we chose, whatever is happening. So there is nothing that can go wrong unless we bring a lot of resistance into the process, physical resistance, emotional resistance, mental resistance, those kind of things. And otherwise, nothing can actually go wrong as such. Yeah, and also, I even go as far as questioning some of the so-called scientific or statistical things that talk about maybe what can go wrong during birth and how much there is of, maybe babies dying and so on and so on. I think today, at least in the Western world, there is very, very little evidence for any such things occurring naturally. And if they do occur naturally, then that too has a higher setup, which we also need to trust and have faith in, that we are there, and even our babies are there to give to each other as souls certain lessons and certain insights that might not be comfortable to go through and experience, but are always, always, always not against us, but for us and for our growth and for our expansion and for our evolvement.
Yeah, definitely. I think that it's like when you spoke of the creator, it's like being cradled in something bigger than us that we are also a part of. And as you said, going to the hospital, the thing about hospitals by their nature is they are the opposite of what we need physiologically. And I think it's tantamount to how powerful we are that anyone can still give birth and have a good experience in that environment. Not that people aren't supportive, because they are. It's the fact that you've changed from your own home environment where you feel safest and you're in control and you're the power decision maker. Then you go somewhere with bright lights, with lots of strangers, and it's that will cause some tension, which is going to slow the labour down, which is so common. Will transfer. It stops for a while because you're like, am I safe here yet? And so often people will say, yes, choose where you feel safe, but it's very like, have you considered what it will feel like to transfer at a point when physiologically your body is saying, find my safe space, I don't want to move anymore, find those safe people. That's what's happening on a physiological biology level in your body. The early labour, like I think in animals in the earlier labour they can pull the baby back up and run, but when it gets to a certain point, and we're the same, when you see women arrive in hospital already pushing, you can't do anything to disturb the woman at that point. Well, you can, but it's coming out because that point in like history of the animal, if the tiger was there, you have to get the baby out quickly, pick it up and run. So that's when it's all going, and it can't. But the early labour, there's the disturbance factor. So the moving to the hospital, that's why hypnobirthing is so helpful, because you're carrying that home environment with you. You're focusing, carrying it with you. But it does beg the question sometimes, because depending on where you are, that bright lights, all of that is going to interrupt the physiology, like the environment. And I know we're going to, like you said, about the ocean, and you were born in your daughter was born in a remote.
Yeah, my daughter now.
And I feel like that's closer to nature, and that energy of nature environment is slower. And it has the wisdom of the millennia that we can do this, that we are a part of nature. So when we sit in nature, even if we don't call it meditation, if we think of you way before we did all that, just the fact of walking around in nature, we're feeling that, we're hearing that unspoken, unworded message, slow down, and you can do this. And I think that bringing nature into your environment in some way is another support, it's like we don't consider that always. It's not necessarily what people give as advice, but it's the energy dynamic of your birthing field and your.
Yes, absolutely. So one thing I would like to add to the now the first birth story that I just shared is, I think it's so important that women really have the choice to give birth at the level of confidence that they're at. And I think my story in this case also demonstrates that even if you choose to or end up in a hospital, you still have choices to surround yourself, like in my case, with that wonderful, calming, motherly midwife. She was amazing. She was just, just needed to say one word or look at me, and my whole body relaxed and was melting. It was wonderful. So you still have those choices to surround yourself with a network and almost a womb whilst you're giving birth. You be and create a womb that can hold you, even if the lights are blaring, even if you are straight on your back in a hospital bed. There is still, of course, in preparation, but even in that process, we still have choices in each and every moment. And the main choice, of course, and maybe the only choice that we really have, where our point of power is in every moment, what kind of thought are we putting and entertaining in our minds in that moment? Are we saying, oh, I'm powerless, I'm now here, this is not nice, this is horrible, this is painful, this is yadi-da-di-da? Or are we saying, whoa, I'm all right, this is okay, everything is okay? Yeah, and we can, I don't know much about hypnobirthing, but that would be my hypnosis, to keep telling myself, I'm okay. Everything is okay here. Nothing can ever not be okay. My baby is okay. Everything is cool. Yeah, so those kind of things. And then the second aspect, when you say to surround ourselves with nature, that would lead straight into then my second story of giving birth with my daughter somewhere in the outbacks of Africa, which I was still by that time fairly uneducated as to birth choices, but I had gained this strange, out of nowhere level of confidence with my own body. So we were, my husband and I, we were actually preparing. When my son was just after he was born, I started preparing, which I had already finalized before I even became pregnant, to move to Africa for a while. The plan was with a local family and women group center. So that was kind of in the process, and I had gotten funding up already. So my son was born, and we took that first year of his existence to kind of prepare for that project and pull all the strings together. And as we were meant to go in, I think July of 1998, and in February, I, a feminist, someone who thought now she had used natural birth regulation for years. She had charted her cycles. She had measured her basal temperature. She had done all those kind of things to do away with all kinds of contraceptions that could be detrimental to her health. Found myself pregnant. Unexpectedly. So my husband and I, we had wanted a second child, but definitely, we had placed this for after we'd been back from Africa. So we were preparing to go to Africa, knowing, eventually once we're back, then we have our second child, because that would be ideal. Our son would then be 3.5 or 4 years old. What a fabulous spacing, because they shouldn't be coming so close to, all the mental preparation we had. And here I was, wham, pregnant. And my whole world started collapsing, because I didn't want to be pregnant at that time. I was devastated, which it took me quite a while actually to forgive myself for, because I thought, oh my God, what kind of emotions did I flood my baby with in the first few weeks of that pregnancy? But we're cool now with each other, and I have forgiven myself for that and worked on that, and cleared out any possible negative ramifications of that. But I was devastated. So abortion was never an option for me. So, but I felt, okay, my whole wonderful life stream to go to Africa and build this health center is falling to pieces. And then again, by divine intervention, now my normally very skeptical and not into natural things, but always kind of following my lead husband, the father of my children, he suddenly came down with saying, no, but it's okay, we're going. No matter what. I mean, if there's anything that should go wrong with this pregnancy or birth, it's going to go wrong wherever we are. And wherever we are, whatever is meant to happen will happen. Just don't worry, we are going. And I said, oh, really? So that's how I picked up from that initial devastation, and we decided, yes, we're going. Of course, the whole world, especially our families, our parents on both sides, said we were totally and utterly crazy, insane, irresponsible, and I don't know what other labels we got for that decision. But we stayed with it, both of us, and that was very nice. We stayed with it. We went. By that time, you know, I was confident with my body. Pregnancy developed without any problems, and so we arrived in Kenya when I was 6 months pregnant. There was not much to be seen on my body, honestly. It was very interesting. When I arrived, the family we lived with somewhere really in the bush there, we had no white people privileges or amenities. We started living in a tiny mud hut. I don't know what, smaller, much smaller, maybe half the size of a shipping container, for comparison. So us and our tiny toddler son, who found the transition very hard because he had just learned to walk on these even Western world surfaces and pavements and floors, and now there were stones and sticks and roots everywhere, and it really frustrated the hell out of him. So anyway, we arrived there. I was 6 months pregnant. They didn't believe I was pregnant. They said, no, you just gained a little weight. I said, well, just watch me. 3 months later, I will give birth. I'm 6 months pregnant. And luckily, since I was and had prepared for this health center to be built, we had already a young Kenyan woman in training to become a nurse in a almost nearby little mission hospital. And so that little mission hospital, I was already known there. I knew the people there. She was training there. And there was a very lovely Philippine female doctor there, Dr. Darlene. And so we arrived. I went to Dr. Darlene, said, Dr. Darlene, I am pregnant. You will be the one to check in with me and see whether everything goes all right here. And if it is the will of God, I'll actually make it to give birth here. Otherwise, we'll have to do it out there in the bush. Now, the thing was that the family I lived with, that was a polygamous family. And so the first wife had not had children. And so it is the tradition in this area of Africa that the husband now, as compensation, gets a sister, a younger sister, on top into the marriage deal to compensate for the first wife not having children. So this second wife, who was, when we arrived there, she was not yet 40, I think she was 38 or something. She had had 16 pregnancies by that time. Unbelievable. I mean, that man had just not stopped impregnating her and impregnating her and impregnating. 9 of these children were alive. All the others had gone in one way or the other, including pregnancies then terminated early and so on, because she had been warned, don't, you know, you die when you try to give birth next time. anyway, the positive aspect of that was that the first wife had been the midwife for all these births there. So I thought, well, at least they know what they're doing. You know, none of these children had died through, at the process of birth. You know, some shortly thereafter, some when they already were a couple of years old, as happens in rural Africa still these days, or back then. I mean, that is over 20 years ago now as well. And so anyway, I thought, okay, either we make it to the little hospital or we don't make it. The thing was, we were coming up towards rainy season, and we lived so remote that when it was raining, we could not get out there. We had a rickety old VW bus, but when there was rain, then sometimes with the help of about 20 people pushing us through the mud, we could make it out to the main road and then get somewhere else. But often we had to wait until like noon the next day when the tracks had dried off a little bit after one of those big monsoon rain showers. So, okay, I started with the health center, did all the negotiations, and kept being pregnant, and the belly grew and the belly grew. So in that case, I developed what you mentioned earlier, which I didn't have really in my first pregnancy, the communication with my baby. In the first pregnancy, it was more the communication with my own body and my body wisdom. But here, I started really communicating with my baby, saying, because she was due on the 5th of November, and normally by that time, the rains would have started. And I said, well, if you could possibly not grow so big, and if you could possibly come a little earlier, and if you could possibly start off this birthing experience with what is it called in English terms? The break, when the waters break.
Yeah, when with the waters breaking. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So those were my requests to my baby. I said, well, that would be really great, because I knew that when the waters break, that will give us now time to try and get, if it's not raining, to the little mission hospital. Because then, after a few hours, normally that's when contractions start. So that would be a really good thing. I thought, then it's not starting all along, because I couldn't imagine now making a very bumpy ride, being fully in labor already to that hospital. That was kind of, not a good idea.
I've been on the bumpy roads in Africa. I can well imagine how that would not be very comfortable. I've been on the bumpy roads in Africa pregnant as well. It's not fun.
No, exactly. So that was, and the road was very bumpy, and it would have been, or it was about a 45-minute drive on very bumpy roads. And I thought, no, hang on, I'm not sure how to survive. I mean, I knew I would survive it, of course, but, it wasn't a fun idea. So I had this idea, no, breakage of waters would be ideal. And then after a couple of hours, now we start this contraction. This labor, but that word I really don't like as well. Labor. I mean, are we the Labor Party? Are we workers in a factory? No, I really don't like that one.
Do what you asked.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, to also cut that story shorter, it worked out that way. It was really beautiful. On the day of giving birth, or on the day before, I was in the local kind of town with my Kenyan kind of mama. We were walking up and down, buying building materials for the health center, and doing all kinds of things, going to the bank to withdraw money, where they always asked me whether the father was Kenyan, and were horribly disappointed when I said, no, he's actually also a white man. Oh, they didn't like that. But anyway, because I turned up with this Kenyan mama, and they thought that would be my mother-in-law, but she wasn't, obviously. So anyway, we were walking up and down there the whole morning. We came back to our place in the bushes and in the coffee plantation and the bananas. About at 1 p.m. We had gone very early, and by then my little son, who was now 20 months old, he normally had an afternoon nap, but he was already a bit fidgety. He didn't really want to go for his afternoon nap without me lying down with him. So I did, and I lay down, and then normally once he'd fallen asleep, I would, sneak out and then have my nice afternoon cappuccino with my husband under the mango tree. That was our daily sacred ritual break time. Now he was fidgeting and fidgeting and fidgeting. Wasn't going to go to sleep. From around 1:30 or 2 p.m. I tried and tried. I was lying there trying to calm him down, trying to make him sleep. No, my son decided not to sleep that day, and so by about 3 p.m. I gave up. I thought, okay, this ain't gonna work today, never mind. And I got up from the little mattress where we'd both been lying on, and he was also sitting up, and whoosh, I was standing in a puddle. And we were pee training our little son at that time so that he wouldn't pee in the house. And he was looking at me like, he wasn't yet talking much, but he was saying, "Peed in house." So he was thinking, they are trying to make me not pee in the house, and she is making a big puddle in the house. Anyway, so we knew that the time had come, and I then, called my husband. I think this is what's happening here. We have a big puddle. Let's go. So by about 4 p.m. we were on the road, and normally by 4:30 the rains set in. It was like clockwork. There are these monsoon rains. Afternoon, 4:30 p.m. It's bucketing down. You know that as well. So we were on the road. We, by great coincidence, we picked up our Kenyan mama. She was on the market that day, and she actually, for inexplicable reasons, had come back earlier. She was sitting at the local marketplace by the main road, and we hit the main road, and for some reason we said, oh, let's just make a little detour and see whether they are back. Normally we would have gone straight because it was far too early for them to come back. And there she was. She just put down her bundles of secondhand clothing that she normally sold in the market down. We said, come on, hop on board. So she hopped into our little VW van, and here we were rattling towards the hospital. I was kind of padded up to catch any other water, but I felt very comfortable. Nothing was yet contracting. So we arrived in the hospital like 4:45 or by 5, and basically 15 minutes after we arrived there, the rains did start, and it did start bucketing down. So there was absolute divine timing. So when we arrived, it was not yet raining. They came running. Now they all knew she is going to come for giving birth in our hospital. I was the first white woman to ever give birth in that hospital. So everybody was on high alert, and everybody already knew me somehow because I was now this only white woman walking in and out there. And so they came running with a wheelchair. I stepped out of the van and said, "No, guys, I can walk very nicely. Thank you. Don't make me sit in a wheelchair." So we went in. And again, the whole process developed beautifully. The Dr. Darlene examined me. She said, "No, this is all fine. We got a room to ourselves, the whole caboodle." What I did get annoyed with was when at around 8 p.m., I had fallen asleep, but then the whole crew there, so my husband and our Kenyan mama and our nurse trainee who was with us in the room as well, they decided they should eat fish from the local canteen, fried fish, and the whole room filled with that fish smell. It's something, whenever I smell that fish now, tilapia from Lake Victoria, it always triggers that memory. I say, don't eat fish. And again, I started emptying out my own stomach with whatever was in there. to make space for the birth process. So anyway, everything processed nicely and easily. Are you there, Charlotte?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Oh yeah, now I hear you again, but you
I can see my picture's frozen. Let me just pause and
yeah,
start
exactly.
again.
I was just interrupting briefly.
Yeah, I mean, if you can hear me fine, it'll be recording the sound fine, and your picture's fine. It's me that's frozen, but I can see that I'm totally frozen on screen. But it is recognizing
Yes.
my sound because it highlights the picture when I'm talking. So I know that it's recording.
Okay.
So we'll just have to go with a blank screen for me, like a blank picture. But I believe it's recording.
No problem. You were just not twitching a muscle.
Yeah, I'm literally just standing there.
Twitching a muscle in your face anymore. And I thought, hang on.
I know, I don't know. It's just not.
Anyway.
Pause or whatever. But yeah, tell. I mean, I love the way that your daughter listened to you there. And so you had the birth experience.
Yeah, she did. She totally did. And it was actually a week early. Yeah, it was a week. She was born on the 27th of October. And her so-called due date was on the 5th of November. And I just actually learned from you the other day that very, very few babies come before their so-called due date. So she really had listened, and it unfolded beautifully. So by at a certain point when contractions really also came regularly, we went into their so-called labor ward, and then they had the theater. So it was also all kind of hospitalized, but you know, to bring it back to the nature element, of course, the whole hospital itself sat in a beautiful area of trees that were blossoming and flowering. There were these flaming red flamboyant trees in bloom everywhere. There were blue jacaranda trees. And we in the so-called labor ward, we went into that room, and outside there was like a courtyard that was full and full and full with beautiful red and pink hibiscus bushes. And so as I was making my way through the night, my husband kept picking me hibiscus flowers, and I carried them. I was just, you know, immersing myself in my experience with these hibiscus flowers. And sometimes when contractions came, I squashed one and he got me the next, and he got me the next. So the birth of my daughter is forever inextricably linked with hibiscus flowers. Even when it was her birthday last week, you know, I went out and found hibiscus to put into her. We had an online birthday party because, of course, I'm not there at the moment. I put into her birthday bouquet. So that was very beautiful. And the beautiful scent was always wafting in. During this birth, I had to keep walking. Whenever I stopped walking, the contraction stopped. So then nothing, absolutely nothing happened.
Yeah.
And so I kept walking. So from about, again, 11 p.m. up until 4 something p.m., I kept going round and round and round in circles, emptying out bladder and bowels in the beginning, and stomach again, which I found helpful. And was already kind of looking forward to, so to have all that space within my body. So I walked and walked and walked, and whenever I stopped, so the doctor eventually, she said, no, just let me check in on you. So she put me back on my back, or asked me to go back on my back. Nothing happened. All contractions stopped. And she started, you know, twitching the belly a little bit to get the contractions going, but nothing. So I said, no, let me just walk, you know. So it was interesting and lovely, because that was really a teamwork, you know. She also trusted me as I trusted her. Yeah. And my husband was there, who also trusted me, and I trusted him. So that was very beautiful. And what I loved about that was that literally the whole hospital, I mean, what means I didn't love it back then, but in retrospect, the whole hospital was watching. they'd all gotten up in the middle of the night. I mean, there were about 25, 30 people around in that, they were looking in through the windows. This was not a private birth. This was a very public affair. Everyone wanted to see, and me, I was making noise and moaning and groaning. In Kenya, unfortunately, they have also suppressed and usurped the birthing process in very negative ways. And for instance, the women are not supposed to make any sound. And I always found a lot of sounding extremely helpful. And so, of course, I did that, making whatever noises I wanted to make. And so they were really watching there. What is she doing, but they could also see that it was all going very well. And so then in the end, by 4, it was again, my son was 4:24. My daughter was born 4:54. By about 4:30, then the doctor said, so now this baby is coming out now. And again, she asked me to put myself flat on the back, which I did. Again, everything stopped. And she said, just push. So I just pushed, and ploops, my daughter was out. It was a very sweet and simple process. Again, because I had relaxed, I had listened to the body with the walking. There were no birth injuries whatsoever at all. So everything was completely intact in my vulva and genitals, vagina, womb. Beautiful. The reason why I had to keep walking, it turned out to be that her umbilical cord was a little bit short. It wasn't wrapped around her in any way, but it was a little short, so that for some reason, whenever I lay on my back, naturally the contractions stopped because it needed the gravity, I suppose. I don't know, to actually, not stop the umbilical cord from overstretching. So that was the only reason. But again, there was no risk in that or something, because if you listen to whatever needs to happen in that moment, then everything is going very well. So that was the second birth story. Again, she was born 4:54, then all the procedures, whatever, but there weren't many procedures because I didn't want procedures. So everything was being done. We went back to our room with our baby, rested a bit, and then by morning checked out of the hospital. And by 1 p.m. the next day, again, we were into our little mud hut in the bush with our baby. So that was the second birthing experience. So even there's nothing scary about that. When we trust, then our bodies know. And our bodies know, and the more we trust, the more we know. And the more we know, the more we can trust.
Yeah, well, I love that. Thank you. Can you still hear me? I'm just checking.
Yes, I hear you. I don't have any picture of you completely right now.
Oh. My picture's gone off completely. It won't work. It says put another camera on. I think we'd probably have to stop the interview to do that. So I'm hoping it's a new computer. It's probably just the internet malfunction. So unfortunately, I'm sorry. Yeah. I am still here. You're not just talking to a blank screen. But
no, it's okay. That's good practice for me now to talk to a blank screen. I still hear you.
At least you can still hear me. That's the thing, because I know it's hard talking to yourself, but I am listening, and I really enjoyed the story. Fine. It's beautiful, and how wonderful! It's really noticeable that they told you to go on your back, and you knew you needed to walk. If they'd completely left you, you probably would never have gone on your back. And I know this was a long time ago, and despite all that, you still did a wonderful. I love the hibiscus flowers and it's a beautiful story. And,
the hibiscus, that is just so beautiful. The pink hibiscus will forever be her. Whenever I can get one for her birthday, I'll get it. It's not so easy in the Western world, but
I love that. If you could wave a magic wand right now, what would be your vision for the future of birth across the world, as humans?
Choice. My future for birthing as humans would be choice. connection with nature and our own bodies as being part of nature, warmth, human connection and warmth in the birthing process. So surrounding ourselves and every woman who gives birth with the most exquisitely beautiful cradle of human warmth and connections, all geared up to listen to her needs, whatever they might be in that moment. Of course, we have wonderfully advanced medical facilities, and whenever there is truly need of any of that, may that be available, but not as our first choice. Our first choice is we are humans and we are made for this. We are women. We are made for this. We can do this naturally, beautifully, confidently. In the embrace, hopefully with our loving partners around, or families around, with our children around, with our tribe around, in whatever way we truly choose to give birth. This is our process, not anyone else's.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you, Naraya. I really loved hearing your stories today, and it's just so beautiful. I wonder if we could finish, if there was one thing you would like a woman listening to take away from listening to your stories today, what would it be?
I would like to refer back to what I said earlier. The main message that I want women to hear is that giving birth does not have to be painful. This begins and ends in our minds, and with the relentless conditioning, even a biblical curse, we've been put under. Now, this curse has long been lifted, but we have to catch up with the news as women.
I think that it was a mistranslation as well. The original interpretation,
absolutely,
was a mistranslation of the original text, which never meant to say that. And a lot of women don't know that. It was never meant to say that. It used a different interpretation for the man on labour as the same as a different interpretation for the woman in birth, but it was the same word. So it was an interpretation.
Absolutely.
So we can lift that condition.
And we have been conditioned with that in very pervasive ways. You know, culturally, as humanity, this is a collective consciousness that is still running within our very veins. And we have to and can lift that, and to, as I said, simply choose to experience all this without even that label, pain. Yes, there are immense forces of nature going on. And as I said, everything is contracting and stretching. But it's a little bit the same as when I do yoga. There are also stretches that can sometimes be a little bit uncomfortable. And what I'm telling myself in that moment is lean into the stretch. I'm not telling myself, let me get out of this pain. I'm saying lean into the stretch, gently, carefully, lean into the stretch, but go for the stretching rather than resisting and trying to get out of it. So that is the main thing. And the other thing is the faith and trust in our own capabilities, and the fact that life is always on our side, that the divine is always on our side. Life is always for us, and whatever we experience is always for us, never against us.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you so much. I really love those points, Naraya, and I've really enjoyed hearing your story. It's going to be a really uplifting story and an interesting thought for everyone that listens. I hope it spreads far and wide, part of the summit. So thank you so much for taking the time out to join us today. And yeah, I look forward to putting your interview live in the next few days. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Charlotte. Thank you for having me listening as the first one now to this story. I hope it goes out to many women who need, and men as well, who need to hear exactly this or who take away any aspect of what I have said. And I really want to just thank and commend you once more for putting together such an incredible event, and may it go wild as we can allow ourselves to be when we are pregnant, when we give birth, when we bring about these incredible, wonderful, when we are that force of nature as women. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. You can't see my namaste back, but thank you.
Mm-hmm.